This is my Viva on what do Egyptian understandings of the afterlife tell us about their world. When we think about ancient Egypt, we typically think about mummies, such as King Tut, along with other famous people or structures that lived during that time. However, we don't take into account the Egyptian practices and customs that made the Egyptian culture the Egyptian culture. Some of these things are their burial practices, their funerary inscriptions that led to insight on the Egyptian morality, the moral requirements indicated in the Book of the Dead were built upon Ma and the concept noted in the Egyptians' distinctive social hierarchy and burial practices. Point 1. Egyptian burial practices emerged from and was defined by Egyptian religion's unique cosmology. Deaths and burials were very different than they are now. Egyptians had a huge emphasis on their afterlife, and there were three main ways that people would bury their dead. One was their body was taken to the place of purification, was washed, and then brought to the house of beauty, where the body was mummified. The second, oil of cedar was injected, which prevented liquid from escaping the body, which is then pickled in natron and left for a few days. On the last day, the oil is drained, and the effects of this are so strong that it even melts the stomach in a liquid state, where it is then returned to where it is then just melted. The third is to pour and clear the intestines with a purge, and to keep the body 70 days in natron, and then give the body back. This was typically the poor way of doing things. A quote by Herodotus says, quote, "The embalmers, when a body is brought to them, produce specimen models in wood, painted to resemble nature and graded in quality." End quote. Point 2. Funerary inscriptions and wisdom literature provide us with important insights into Egyptian morality. Although our ideas of ethics and morality seem obvious and self-evident, some of these ideas are not universal. We can learn what Egyptians believed in from their writings inscribed in tombs. Some of these are not acceptable. Some of these were obviously not acceptable, like theft and murder. However, others like blasphemy, stealing from temple offerings, tempering with grain measures, lying, etc., had a larger influence on things we wouldn't consider a big deal. So just some of the things that we think of typically as being bad, those were obviously bad back then, like murder. But then other things that are kind of less evident that we wouldn't think about as being a huge deal. For instance, lying. Lying's not good, but it wasn't something that's severely punishable to this day. A quote by the Declaration of Innocence by somebody, no one knows who this was by, but it was written and we found it. "I have done no justice to people, nor have I mistreated an animal. I have done no wrong." So that was one of the things that we wouldn't take as a huge deal, of that doing injustice to someone or mistreating an animal slightly. That wouldn't be a huge deal for us now, but it was a huge deal then. All right, point 3. Understanding implications of Ma'at for Egyptian morality. Ma'at is the cosmic and social order to the universe, established by the Creator, or God. Ma'at was personified by a goddess named Ma'at. The goddess represented the divine harmony and balance of the universe. The people of Egypt had an obligation to uphold Ma'at through obedience to the king. A quote by Joshua J. Mark says, "The king's primary duty was to uphold Ma'at and maintain the balance between the people and their gods." End quote. In doing so, needed to make sure that those inferior of him were well taken care of and well taken care for. Borders were secure, and the rites and rituals were performed according to the accepted tradition. And if he did that, then he was following Ma'at, because then people would be able to follow Ma'at as well. So although when we think about ancient Egypt and we think about mummies such as King Tut along with other famous people or structures, there is a lot more to take into account for the Egyptian practices and customs that made the Egyptian culture, such as burial practices, funerary inscriptions that led to Egyptian morality, and the moral requirements indicated by the Book of the Dead that were built on Maat. Thank you. Thank you, Franklin. I appreciate it. I am not going to be able to probably grade your Viva this week. I'll send you the one for week 1 and last week, but as for this week, I'll be in Kansas City for up until Sunday, so I won't be able to grade that for you, but I'll get first thing on it on Monday. So I appreciate you, Franklin. Thank you for everything, and I'll see you later. Bye.